You mentioned the Orechnik, and this came in response to this attack on Putin's residence. I was wondering what you make of this, because I listened to former advisor of Zelensky, Alexei Orestovich, who made the point that the real target was probably beneath this residence, which is a nuclear command center. And I thought it was interesting because, as we know, in June of 2025, they also attacked Russia's nuclear bombers, that is its nuclear deterrent. Again, the Russians see the British as being behind this. And of course, in May of 2024, we know that Russia's early warning radars for nuclear attack was attacked as well. And you can add all these attacks on the Engels nuclear air base, but if you put them all together, there's a lot of attacks on Russia's nuclear deterrent here then. I mean, if any of these things had happened once during the Cold War, there would have been panic, red flags going up, possible nuclear exchange. But now this is becoming almost a common occurrence. What do you think is the thought process behind this? I mean, going after the nuclear deterrent of the largest nuclear power in the world?
Well, first of all, when you put it that way, it sort of makes it look imbecilical. But let's back up for a second. MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service of the British. When it comes to Russia, they are extraordinarily incompetent. Extraordinary, because, I mean, we only have to take a look at the case of Christopher Steele, who was the former SIS operative agent who worked in the former Soviet Union, and the quality of his work. There, in the 1990s, they spent a whole bunch of effort and not so much money recruiting anybody they could. I mean, it was easy pickings. They just went out and recruited everybody: taxi drivers, hookers, politicians, former politicians, everybody. Then the Russians cracked down, and if you remember, there were some famous scenes coming out of Russia, the Spy Rock, if you remember the Spy Rock.
Yeah.
And the Russians, of course, uncovered the Spy Rock and uncovered everything that was going on in the Spy Rock and unraveled, those networks that the British had that were functioning. The British have some deep sleep networks that they've activated. We saw them activate them in support of the Kerch Bridge attack, which was a British operation, and we saw them bring it up with this operation with the drone striking the airfield. But the British, they are very superficial here. You see, their Russia house is appended to their London station, and their London station is home of a bunch of anti-Putin emigres. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, not Khodorkovsky, I think, the former oil oligarch who was imprisoned for corruption and then released. He's now there using his billions to work with MI6 to create this anti-Putin propaganda machine. And they advise the British. They work hand in glove. And so all you have to do is listen to the stupidity that comes out of this former oligarch's mouth and the people around him, and you see how it's translated into action by MI6. The belief that if you hit these targets, you will undermine the credibility of Vladimir Putin. They believe that Vladimir Putin is a unpopular dictator who rules through fear and intimidation, and that if they can expose him as weak and frail, that they will create the opportunity for these disaffected, enraged aspects of Russian society to remove him from power. So they're the ones behind this. This is a deliberate act to be seen as not destroying Russia's capability, but destroying Putin's reputation. That's the goal. That's the objective. And Donald Trump bought into it. This drone attack is an American attack. It's not a British attack. It's an American attack in support of a British plan. Keep Ukraine in the fight. Let's bring down Vladimir Putin. But they made a fatal mistake. They gave away the evidence. They these 91 drones that came in, many of them were of a type that made use of a specific computer chip that contains all the programming that's used to guide this drone. And this drone doesn't operate on GPS because GPS is, of course, jammed. It's pre-programmed, and then it has AI. And as it flies in, it will occasionally take a picture and then compare the picture to mapping data that's stored and realign, readjust based upon wind speed and all these things are collecting, and then fly to the target. Um, to get that, the intelligence that has to be loaded into the chip has to be both extremely detailed and also extremely timely, meaning you need the most recent updates for this thing to hit the target it wants to. Uh, this means that Palantir, this company that's running this operation on behalf of the CIA and the British to program these chips, they claim that they make use of commercially available information. There's no commercially available data collectors out there that can collect the data that went into this. When the Russians reverse engineered the information in this chip, the timing of the information is linked now to assets that are capable of collecting during that window of opportunity. The specificity of the data, again, limits it to certain. The bottom line is the Russians know exactly which intelligence resource collected the information. The way this data is packaged, too, to consolidate it, because you're taking different sources of information and you're bringing them together into a single digital information packet. There's literally only one place in Europe that can do this, and that's a Department of Defense uh, organization or entity in Europe that supports the targeting of the Tomahawk missile, because the same principles of targeting here are applied. So the Russians know which intelligence assets collected the data, who processed it and packaged it and put it into this chip. So when the Russians turned this over to the United States at a time when Donald Trump was saying, nah, there was no attack. If they did, they attacked this thing here. The Russians said, here. And by doing so, they said, we know everything. Yeah, I mean, it does, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the CIA is going to reverse engineer the chip and go, they know everything, which means Trump will have been exposed as a liar, an absolute liar, a fraud, a man who literally used negotiations to try and target the president of Russia. Not in a way to kill him. I mean, look, drones have a long time of flight. They were detected. This was a demonstration of vulnerability designed to create the impression that Putin is weak and that he is subordinated to Trump, that Trump is daddy to him and Trump gets to dictate and Putin's the misbehaving little boy. And the other signal it sends to Russians, including especially those who have become excited by Kirill Dmitriev's economic outreach, that, hey, everything could be better if we just got these sanctions lifted. But now we can't because of Vladimir Putin. And he's sort of losing it. I mean, he's attacked, he's doing nothing and all that. This is the impression. Again, British psychological operations, mental warfare, information operations. They do this for a living. I've actually done it with them in the past, targeting Iraq. I know the office. I could take you into the headquarters and walk you up and take you to the office. I don't know if I know the people anymore because I'm of a certain age where my contemporaries may not be in service anymore, but I know who they are and what they do. And the Russians know this as well, but they're so wrong because Vladimir Putin isn't weak. And what the Russians just did, that first Orchnik they used was a test missile. The Russians said it's operational test. Now they've gone into serial production and they have deployed a brigade in Belarus, but they're in the process of deploying other brigades. Now these brigades are using production quality missiles. But at the time, Vladimir Putin said, we have a number of other Orchniks available to us, test missiles. These are test missiles. The missile that was launched against Ukraine was a test Orchnik out of Kapustin Yar, where they continue to do operational testing. Because remember, this is a weapon system that's been brought in fairly quickly. And so there's still some tests that are being done or have been done recently, but they have a stockpile of these missiles now that aren't operational quality, meaning they're not serial production. They don't have the certificates. They don't have they call them the passports that attach to them out of the production facility. I believe that Russia launched another one of these test missiles. Um, but in doing so, they preserve their stockpile. We don't know what the production rate of the Orchnik is. We can guess that if it went into serial production in August, and by December, they are able to deploy um, a minimum of 10 missiles to this Belarusian Russian unit, because you need 9 for the 3 battalions of 3 launchers of 3 missiles each, and you need a 10th for training purposes. Um, so we have an idea what their production rate is. It may be greater than that because Russia's talking about simultaneously preparing other units for fielding. But they didn't launch from a combat position. They launched from Kapustin Yar, which tells me it's another training missile. But the important thing is they launched. And if you look at the rhetoric that came out of Russia afterwards, the Orchnik is now a permanent part of Russia's strategic nuclear deterrent posture. Any hope we had of um, reviving arms control, for instance, New START, which will expire next month, it will not be extended. It's over. It's dead. Um, Vladimir Putin talked about extending the caps associated with that. But to do that, you needed the United States to concur. Right now, there's no movement in that direction. But you also needed the political environment to be conducive to this. And the key element to this political environment is that there was no escalation in the INF, meaning if the United States deploys Dark Eagle to Europe, that's the end of it. Or there can be no deployment of Golden Dome. Well, Trump just turned the defense budget he promised to cut in half. He now is increasing it by 33, by 50%, 1.5 trillion, much of that going to Golden Dome. So the Russians have just basically said, we're done with arms control. I was supposed to go to Russia in March and April to St. Petersburg, where we were going to have a very cool exercise. Graduate level students would play the role of American and Russian negotiating teams. We would have a team of American arms control experts advising the team playing the Americans, a team of Russian arms control experts advising the team playing the Russians. And then we would go through this exercise, capture this data, and produce a deliverable that we were going to give to both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which was supporting this endeavor at the time, and the Department of State, as an effort to sort of kickstart, to say, here's some ideas. And there's a lot of excitement for this. That's dead. They just canceled. The Russians are like, no, we're not doing arms control anymore. It's just not going to happen. There's no reason to even go through the motions of it. So this is a big deal. This is a huge deal. We are about to enter an arms race where Russia holds all of the advantages already. They have deployed intermediate forces that are unmatched. They have the best strategic nuclear forces in the world, most modern. The United States is confronted by the reality that our bombers don't work, our missiles are old, and our submarines are aging out quickly, and it's going to cost us trillions of dollars to fix this problem. Money we don't have. At the same time, the president's diverting precious resources to building a missile defense system, which will never work, ever. None of the technology in Golden Dome is proven, and we can't afford it, and it won't work. But from the Russian perspective, the American actions, combined with the fact that the president of the United States attempted to assassinate the president of Russia, it means that the Russians will never do anything to give away the advantages they have. This advantage that they have is what ensures that they will never be defeated. Nobody can defeat Russia because Russia has this unmatched nuclear capability. The Russians will never negotiate that away, ever. They have overmatch in every aspect except perhaps submarine launched ballistic missiles. But with the Poseidon now, I would say that Russia's submarine delivered nuclear arsenal is better than the Trident, meaning it's so that's where we are. It's over for arms control. It's a very sad reality. I don't know if we're going to survive this. This is a very dangerous time. I'm becoming somewhat despondent. I try to remain optimistic, and I will continue to move forward and see what can be done to educate people. But the United States is ruled by a dictator who doesn't care about international law, doesn't care about constitutional law, doesn't care about anything but his own, ego-driven narcissism. And this is a very dangerous thing. Uh, Arms control is about international law, and the United States doesn't believe in international law anymore, which means there can be no arms control. So we're into an arms race that America can't afford, an arms race that underpins the notion of peace through strength. But when the reality of your strength is that you have no strength, um, and yet you want to continue to posture, that creates the potential for bluffing or, you know, biting off more than you can chew. And how long the Russians are willing to play the patient game, I don't know. I mean, the good news is that Russia loves itself, and they believe in their civilization, and they believe in the glory of their civilization. And having resurrected themselves, I don't see the Russians turning into a bunch of lemmings overnight, rushing to the nearest cliff to jump off. Um, and so hopefully we can pray for continued patience and pragmatism on the part of the Russian leadership. But they tried to kill their president. I mean, my God, could you imagine what the American response would be if Donald Trump was in Camp David and 91 Russian drones launched by Venezuela were launched against Camp David at a time where President Putin was saying, hey, just hold on for another hour. I'll be right back. I'll call you back. Just stay right there at Camp David. I'll call you right back. And then try to attack him. We'd be blowing everything up in the world. I mean, the fact that Russia limited their response to what they did, again, is proof positive that Russia's not looking to escalate. But how much longer we can count on Russian, responsible Russian behavior is not known. People are losing their patience in Russia. There's no doubt about that.